Captain Vexai pressed his thin, four-fingered hand against the cold metal wall of his ship's bridge. His large black eyes reflected the dying lights of the control panels around him. The gentle current had been drifting in space for 3 days now, and hope was running out fast. "Captain," called Zixra from the communications station, her voice barely a whisper. "Life support is down to 36 hours, maybe less." Vexai nodded slowly. He had known this moment would come. The engine explosion had damaged too many systems. His crew of 12 Zephyrians were skilled traders, not engineers. They had tried everything they could think of, but nothing worked. The ship groaned around them. It was a sound that made his crew shift nervously in their seats. Zephyrians were not built for stress. Their homeworld was peaceful, with gentle winds and soft rains. Space travel was supposed to be safe and quiet. This was their worst nightmare. "Send out the distress signal," Vexai ordered. "All frequencies. Emergency power only." Zixra's hands moved over her console. Her fingers shook as she typed. "Signal broadcasting, Captain. But we are so far from the trade routes. No one comes out." "Here. Someone will hear us," Vexai said, though he did not believe his own words. They were at the edge of known space, in a region most ships avoided. The only thing out here was the quarantine zone around that death world the Council had forbidden contact with decades ago. The bridge fell silent, except for the steady beep of the distress signal. Vexai looked at his crew. They were all young, eager traders who had never faced real danger before. They sat in their chairs, waiting to die in the cold darkness of space. Hours passed. The life support systems wheezed and clicked, working harder to keep them alive. The air grew thin and stale. Some of the crew had already moved to the emergency shelter in the ship's center, where the air was still clean. Vexai stayed on the bridge with Zixra and 2 others. If rescue came, they needed to be ready to respond. If it did not come, well, at least they would die at their posts. Captain Zixra said suddenly, her voice rising with excitement. "I am getting a response to our signal." Vexai felt his heart skip a beat. Zephyrians had 2 hearts, and both of his were racing now. Put it through. A voice came through the speakers. It was deep and rough, unlike any species Vexai knew. The words were translated by their computer, but something about the tone made his skin crawl. "This is Commander Jake Sullivan of the patrol ship Iron Wolf. We received your distress call. What is your situation?" The crew on the bridge looked at each other with fear in their eyes. The voice sounded like it came from a predator. But they were dying, and this was their only chance. "This is Captain Vexai of the trade vessel Gentle Current," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "We have suffered engine failure and life support damage, 12 crew members. We have less than 2 days of air remaining." There was a pause, and the voice came back, even more determined than before. "We are 2 hours away at maximum burn. Hang tight, we are coming to get you." Connection ended. Vexai stared at the communication panel. Someone was actually coming to help them. But who were these beings? The voice had not identified their species, and the ship name meant nothing to him. "Zixra, run a search on that ship name," he ordered. Her fingers moved quickly over her console. After a few minutes, she looked up with terror in her large black eyes. "Captain, the computer shows no record of any ship called Iron Wolf in our databases, but it did find something else." "What?" The signal came from the direction of the quarantine zone. "The one around that death world?" The bridge went completely silent. Every Zephyrian knew about the death world. It was the stuff of scary stories told to children. A planet so dangerous that the Galactic Council had declared it off limits too. All civilized species, beings there were said to be violent predators, who lived on a world that would kill most galactic citizens in minutes. "That cannot be right," Vexai whispered. "The Council said that world was to be avoided at all costs. The creatures there are too dangerous." "Signal definitely came from that direction," Captain Zixra confirmed, and it was strong. "They must be close to the quarantine boundary." One of the other crew members, a young male named Kivtar, spoke up from his station. "Captain, what if the stories are true? What if they really are Deathworlders coming to our ship?" Vexai felt cold. Fear run through his body. But then he looked around at his dying crew, at the failing systems. at the empty space around them. They were going to die anyway. Maybe these Deathworlders would kill them quickly instead of letting them suffocate slowly. It does not matter who they are, he said finally. We are dead if we stay here. At least this way we have a chance. But even as he said it, Vexai wondered what kind of chance they really had. The council had quarantined that world for good reasons. The stories said the beings there were like nothing else in the galaxy. They lived on a planet full of storms, earthquakes, poisonous creatures, and deadly weather. They were predators who had fought their way to the top of their world's food chain, and now these legendary Deathworlders were coming to their ship. The distress beacon continued to beep steadily, counting down the time until their rescuers arrived. Vexai ordered his crew to prepare for contact, though none of them knew what that really meant as the Iron Wolf approached through the darkness of space. Vexai could only hope that they had made the right choice.
Soon
They would learn what it meant to meet the creatures from the Deathworld. Soon, they would meet the humans. The Iron Wolf dropped out of faster-than-light travel with a flash of blue energy that lit up the darkness around the gentle current. Captain Vexai watched through the bridge view screen as the human ship moved closer. It was nothing like any vessel he had ever seen before. Where Zephyrian ships were smooth and curved like water droplets, the Iron Wolf looked like it was built for war. Sharp edges, thick armor plating, and weapon ports that seemed to watch everything around them. The ship moved through space with purpose, like a hunting animal stalking its prey. Captain Zixra whispered from her station, "They are scanning us. Very deep scans. They can probably see everything inside our ship." Vexai nodded. He expected that, but what worried him more was how easily the human ship had found them. His crew had been broadcasting their location for hours, but these Deathworlders had located them in minutes once they arrived in the system. The communication system crackled to life. "Gentle current. This is Commander Jake Sullivan. We are going to dock with your ship to assess the damage and get you out of there. Prepare for boarding." Before Vexai could respond, the line went dead. The humans had not asked permission. They had simply told him what they were going to do. This was not how civilized species behaved. This was how predators acted. All crew to emergency stations, Vexai ordered. Full lockdown protocols ready. His crew moved quickly to their positions. If these Deathworlders proved hostile, the gentle current had emergency systems that could seal off sections of the ship. It would not stop determined attackers, but it might buy them time. Through the view screen, Vexai watched as a smaller craft detached from the Iron Wolf. It was a boarding pod, heavily armored and moving fast. As it got closer, he could see figures inside wearing bulky suits that made them look even more threatening. The pod attached to the gentle current with a solid thunk that shook the whole ship. Within minutes, Vexai heard the sound of cutting, tools working on his airlock. These humans were not waiting for permission to enter. They were taking what they wanted. Captain Kivtar called out from his station. "Should I activate the emergency lockdown?" Vexai hesitated. If he sealed the ship now, the humans might decide his crew was hostile. But if he let them in freely, they would have complete access to his ship and crew. Neither choice felt safe. The airlock door opened with a hiss of equalizing pressure. 4 figures stepped through, and Vexai felt his blood turn cold. These were the legendary Deathworlders, and they were everything the stories had said they would be. They were shorter than Zephyrians, but much broader and more muscular. Their suits were covered in weapons, tools, and equipment that Vexai could not identify. They moved with the controlled grace of hunters, their heads turning constantly to watch for threats that might not even exist. The lead figure removed his helmet, revealing a face that made Vexai step back in fear. The human had small eyes, set close together, like a predator's. His jaw was square and strong, built for tearing and crushing. Short hair covered his head, and scars marked his skin, proof of the violence he had survived. "I am Commander Jake Sullivan," the human said. His voice was deep and rough, exactly as it had sounded over the radio. "This is my team: Medic Lisa Grant, Engineer Paul Martinez, and Weapons Specialist Amy Brooks." Human was introduced with a title that spoke of violence or war. Even their medic carried weapons and moved like a fighter. Vexai realized that these beings lived in a world where even healers had to be ready for battle. "We are here to help," Jake continued, "but we need to work fast. Your life support is failing faster than you think." One of the humans, the one called Paul Martinez, was already moving toward the engine compartment with tools that looked more like weapons than repair equipment. He moved through the ship like he owned it, touching systems and reading displays with the confidence of someone who feared nothing. "Wait," Vexai said, finding his voice. "You cannot just walk through our ship without permission. There are protocols." Jake turned to look at him with those small predator eyes. "Your protocols are going to get you killed. You have maybe 6 hours before your air runs out completely. Do you want to follow rules, or do you want to live?" The other humans were already spreading through the ship, their heavy boots echoing in the corridors. Amy Brooks, the weapons specialist, was checking every corner and doorway like she expected enemies to attack at any moment. Lisa Grant was scanning the Zephyrian crew with medical equipment, her face showing concern at what she found.
"Gosh, your people are in bad shape,"
Lisa reported. "Carbon dioxide poisoning, dehydration, and stress symptoms. They need clean air and medical attention. Soon, can you fix our ship?" Vexai asked Paul Martinez, who was now deep inside the engine compartment. Paul's voice came back through the comm system. "Maybe. Your engine core is cracked, but not completely broken. The life support system is jury-rigged and failing. Give me 2 hours and I might be able to get you moving again." "We do not have 2 hours," Zixra said from her station. "The air recyclers just failed completely." The humans looked at each other with expressions that Vexai could not read. Then Jake made a decision that terrified the Zephyrian captain. Emergency evacuation. All crew to the Iron Wolf. Now. "No," Vexa said quickly. "We cannot abandon our ship. And we will not go aboard a Deathworlder vessel." Jake's face grew hard. "You will die if you stay here. We will die if we go with you," Vexai replied. "The stories say your people are violent killers who live on a world of death." Amy Brooks laughed, a sound that made every Zephyrian on the bridge step back in fear. "You think we are going to hurt you? We just traveled 2 hours through space to save your lives?" "Because you want something from us," Kivtar said. "Death. Worlders do not help others without reason." The humans looked at each other again. Then Lisa Grant spoke up. "Look, we know you are scared, but we are not going to hurt you. We are here to help because helping others is what we do." Before anyone could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the gentle current. Zixra checked her instruments and went pale. "Captain, I am reading 3 ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel. They are coming this way fast." Jake grabbed his helmet and put it back on. "What kind of ships?" "Korthok raiders," Vexai whispered, fear making his voice shake. "They must have followed our distress signal." Humans immediately changed. Their relaxed postures became tense and ready. Weapons appeared in their hands as if by magic. Amy Brooks smiled, and it was the most frightening expression Vexai had ever seen. "Well," Jake said, his voice now cold and dangerous, "it's just got interesting." The Korthok ships were closing fast, and the humans were preparing for war. The 3 Korthok ships cut through space like deadly arrows aimed at the helpless gentle current. Captain Vexai watched the scanner display with growing terror as the raider vessels grew larger on his screens. Each ship was twice the size of his trading vessel and bristled with plasma cannons. "They will be here in 12 minutes, Zixra reported, her voice shaking. "Captain, we have to surrender. Maybe they will let us live as slaves." Jake Sullivan stood at the bridge center, studying the tactical display with cold calculation. 3 human teammates had spread throughout the ship, each one moving with the smooth efficiency of born killers. They showed no fear at all, which made Vexai even more nervous. "Tell me about these Korthok," Jake ordered. "What do they want?" "They are raiders," Vexai explained. "They attack disabled ships and take everything of value, cargo equipment, crew members. They sell Zephyrians as slaves in the outer systems." Amy Brooks appeared on the bridge, carrying a large weapon that looked like it could punch holes through armor plating. "How many Korthok per ship?" "Usually 20 to 30 warriors each," Kivtar answered. "They're bigger than humans and much stronger. Their weapons are military grade. Lisa Grant came up from the lower decks, her medical scanner in one hand and a sidearm in the other. Paul says he can get partial power to the engines in maybe an hour. But that still leaves us sitting here when the bad guys arrive. Jake nodded and activated his communication device. Iron Wolf, this is Sullivan. We have 3 Korthok raiders inbound. I need you to pull back to minimum safe distance and prepare for combat. A voice crackled back through the cum. Copy that, Commander. Moving to position now. Want us to engage the raiders? Negative. We are going to handle this ourselves. Vex High stared at the human commander. Handle this yourselves? There are only 4 of you and nearly 100 Korthok warriors coming this way. You cannot fight them all, eh? Jake looked at him with those small predator eyes. Watch us. Amy Brooks was already moving through the ship, her scanner checking every corridor and room. She came back to the bridge with a smile that made Vex High skin crawl. This ship has some interesting possibilities. The cargo bay doors can be opened manually. The life support system has emergency venting. And these bulkheads are thinner than they look. Paul Martinez's voice came over the internal comm system. I have an idea, but you are not going to like it. What if we turn this whole ship into a trap? Explain, Jake said. We let them board us. Make it look like we were just scared traitors. Hiding in the emergency shelter? When they come inside to loot the ship, we hit them from all sides. Vexai felt his heart's racing. You want to let armed raiders inside our ship? That is insane. They will kill us all. Lisa Grant checked her. Weaponin smiled. Only if we let them. You do not understand, Zixer said desperately. Korthok are professional soldiers. They have been fighting for decades. You are just for people. Amy Brooks laughed, a sound that made every Zephyrion on the bridge step backward. Lady, we have been fighting since we learned to walk. Our whole planet is one big war zone. These pirates have no idea what they are about to face. Jake was studying the ship's layout on a portable display. Paul, can you rig the cargo bay to vent atmosphere on command? Already working on it. Give me 10 minutes, Amy. I want explosive charges on the main corridor junctions. Nothing too big. Just enough to channel them where we want them to go. On it, boss. Lisa, you were with the civilians in the emergency. Shelter. If any Korthok get past us, you know what to do. Lisa nodded and checked her medical kit. Vexy noticed that it contained more weapons than medical supplies. Even their healer was ready for war? What about us, Vexy asked.
What?
Do you want my crew to do? Jake looked at him seriously. Stay alive. Hide in the shelter and do not come out until we tell you it is safe. But this is our ship. We should help defend it. Amy Brooks shook her head. No offense, but you people are not built for this kind. A fight you would just get in our way or get yourselves killed. The words stung, but Vexai knew they were true. Zephyrians were traders and diplomats, not warriors. They had lived in peace for so long that they had forgotten how to fight. The Korthok ships were getting closer. Through the view screen, Vex could see their hulls glowing with the heat of rapid deceleration. Soon they would be close enough to launch boarding pods. Paul's voice came over the cum again. Charges are set. I have manual control of the cargo bay doors and the life support venting system. Also rigged some surprises in the engine room if they try to take the ship. Good work, Jake replied. Everyone get into position. Remember, we want them to think this is going to be easy. The humans moved through the ship like ghosts, taking up positions that would give them clear fields of fire while remaining hidden from the raiders. Vex High watched them work and realized that these Deathworlders had done this kind of thing before, many times. All Zephyrian crew to the emergency shelter, Jake ordered. Seal the door and do not open it for anyone except us. Vexai gathered his crew and led them to the small armored compartment in the ship's center. As the door sealed behind them, he could hear the humans making final preparations for battle. Through the shelter's small view screen, he watched the Korthok ships take positions around the gentle current. Boarding pods began launching from all. 3 vessels, each one carrying a full squad of armed raiders. They're coming, Zixra whispered. Lisa Grant stood guard by the shelter door, her weapon ready. Do not worry. My friends know what they are doing. The first boarding pod attached to the hull with a loud clang. Cutting tools began working on the airlock. More pods were attaching to other parts of the ship. Soon the gentle current would be full of Korthok, warriors looking for loot and slaves, but the humans were ready for them. Jake's voice came over the comm. One last time before the fighting started. Remember, we are not just defending this ship. We are teaching these pirates why our species was quarantined in the first place. The airlock door exploded inward, and armed Korthok poured into the ship. They were huge creatures, twice the size of humans, with thick armor and plasma rifles. They moved through the corridors like they owned the place. They had no idea. We're walking into a trap set by the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. The battle for the gentle current was about to begin. The first squad of Korthok raiders stormed through the broken airlock like a pack of angry beasts. They were massive creatures, standing nearly 8 feet tall, with thick gray skin and 4 arms that ended in clawed hands. Each warrior carried a plasma rifle and war-heavy combat armor that gleamed under the ship's emergency lighting. Squad leader Thokomar led his warriors into the main corridor, his scanner showing no signs of life in the immediate area. The ship appeared to be abandoned, except for some weak life signs coming from the emergency shelter deep inside the vessel. Spread out, Thokomar growled to his squad. Check every room, kill any crew that resist, and take the rest for the slave markets. Behind him, more Korthok poured through the airlock. 3 full squads had boarded the ship, with more on the way. This was going to be easy money. The raiders moved down the corridor in standard formation, weapons ready. They had done this hundreds of times before. Disabled ships were always the same. The crew would be hiding somewhere, scared and helpless. It was just a matter of finding them. Thokomar reached the first junction and signaled for his squad to split up. Half would go left toward the engine room, half would go right toward the bridge. Standard boarding procedure. That was when Jake Sullivan struck. The human commander dropped from a maintenance shaft directly behind the Korthok formation. His rifle spat rapid fire, the bullets punching through the weak points in their armor. 3 raiders went down before they even knew they were under attack. Contact, Thokomar roared, spinning around to face this new threat. But Jake was already moving. He rolled behind a bulkhead as plasma bolts seared the air where he had been. Standing, the corridor filled with the smell of burned metal and ozone. 1 human, Thokomar shouted into his comm. 1 human took out 3 of my warriors. More gunfire erupted from the engine room. Paul Martinez had rigged explosive charges throughout the compartment, turning it into a maze of deadly surprises. The Korthok squad that had gone that way found themselves trapped in a room full of booby traps, and a human engineer who seemed to know exactly where they would be. Amy Brooks opened fire from the bridge, her heavy weapon sending armor-piercing rounds down the main corridor. The Korthok tried to return fire, but she was using the ship's own structure as cover, appearing and disappearing like a ghost. Thokomar realized this was not going to be the easy raid he had expected. These humans were not cowering in fear. We're hunting his warriors like animals. All squads converge on the emergency shelter, he ordered. We take the hostages and use them as shields. The surviving Korthok began moving toward the center of the ship, but every step was a battle. Jake appeared behind them, his rifle speaking death. Amy flanked them from above, using maintenance tunnels to stay mobile. Paul turned the ship's own systems against them, venting atmosphere in corridors and triggering fire suppression systems that filled rooms with choking foam that in the emergency shelter. Captain Vexai and his crew listened to the sounds of battle echoing through the ship. Plasma fire, explosions, and the roars of angry Korthok, mixed with the sharp crack of human weapons. How are they doing this? Sixer whispered. There are only 4 of them. Lisa Grant stood by the door, her medical scanner in one hand and a rifle in the other. My people are very good at this kind of work. Through the shelter's communication system, they could hear the humans coordinating their attacks. Jake's voice was calm and professional, like he was directing a training exercise. Instead of a life-or-death battle, Paul, can you seal Corridor 7? Already done. They're trapped between decks 3 and 4. Amy, I need covering fire on the main junction. You got it, boss? The Korthok were learning that fighting humans was nothing like fighting other species. These Deathworlders did not follow normal combat rules. They used the ship itself as a weapon, turning every corridor into a trap and every room into a potential ambush site. Thokmar found himself down to half his original force, and they had not even seen the emergency shelter yet. Its warriors were experienced fighters, but they were used to enemies who fought in predictable ways. These humans were like nothing they had ever faced. Second wave. Launch now. He shouted into his comm. We need reinforcements. More boarding pods slammed into the ship's hull. Fresh Korthok warriors poured through new airlocks, ready to overwhelm the defenders through sheer numbers. But Jake had been expecting this. Paul, now? He called out. Paul Martinez triggered his master control, and the ship's cargo bay doors opened wide. The sudden decompression caught the boarding pods still attached to that section of the hull. Korthok warriors who had been preparing to enter the ship were instead sucked out into the vacuum of space. At the same time, Amy Brooks triggered the charges she had placed throughout the ship. Not enough to destroy the vessel, but enough to seal off entire sections and trap the remaining. Raiders, in small groups, the battle became a series of small, vicious fights as the humans hunted down the separated Korthok squads. Jake moved through the ship like a predator, using his knowledge of the layout to stay one step ahead of his enemies. Amy provided covering fire from unexpected angles, her shots coming from vents and maintenance shafts. Paul turned the ship's own systems into weapons, using everything from fire suppressors to gravity generators to confuse and trap the raiders. Thokmar found himself alone in a corridor with only 2 surviving warriors. Somewhere in the ship, he could hear the sounds of his other squads being systematically destroyed by the humans. This is impossible, one of his warriors said. They are just humans. They should not be able to fight like this. They are death. Worlders, Thokmar replied grimly. The stories were true. Jake Sullivan appeared at the end of the corridor, his rifle aimed at the Korthok leader. His human face showed no emotion, no fear, no anger. Just the cold calculation of a predator that had cornered its prey. Surrender, Jake said simply. Thokmar looked at this small human who had single-handedly destroyed his raiding force. Deathworlders stood there calmly, like killing dozens of Korthok warriors was just another day's work. We surrender, Thokmar said, dropping his weapon. The battle for the gentle current was over. The humans had won. The emergency shelter door opened with a soft hiss, and Captain Vexai stepped out into a ship he barely recognized. Scorch marks covered the walls where plasma fire had burned the metal. Emergency foam dripped from the ceiling where Paul Martinez had triggered the fire suppression systems. The air smelled of burned electronics, and something else that made his nose wrinkle. Is it over? Zixra asked, staying close behind her captain. Jake Sullivan stood in the main corridor, calmly reloading his rifle. His uniform was torn in several places, and a thin line of red liquid ran down his arm where a plasma bolt had grazed him. He showed no signs of pain or exhaustion. It is over, Jake said. The surviving Korthok are secured in cargo bay, too. We'll transfer them to our ship. For questioning, Vexai looked around at the destruction and tried to count the bodies. He stopped counting at 15. There were Korthok corpses scattered throughout his ship, their gray skin now pale in death. Not a single human had been killed. How many of them were there? He asked. 68 total, Amy Brooks replied, appearing from the bridge with her. Weapons slung over her shoulder. We captured 12. The rest. She shrugged, like she was discussing the weather. Lisa. Grant was treating the wounded Korthok prisoners with the same professional care she would give to any patient. It struck Vexai as strange that these Deathworlders would heal enemies who had just tried to kill them. Why do you treat them? He asked her. Lisa looked up from bandaging a Korthok warrior's arm. Because that is what we do. We're not animals, no matter what your stories say. Paul Martinez emerged from the engine room, his hands covered in grease, and his hair singed from working near damaged systems. Good news, Captain. Your ship is spaceworthy again. I managed to patch the engine core and get life support back online. You can make it to the nearest station. You fixed our ship? Kivtar asked in amazement. During a battle, Paul grinned, showing white teeth that somehow looked predatory to the Zephyrian crew. I work better under pressure. Jake activated his communication device. Iron Wolf, this is Sullivan. Mission complete. Prepare to receive prisoners and transfer supplies to the gentle current. Copy that, Commander. Outstanding work. As the human ship moved closer to dock, Vexi found himself studying these strange beings who had saved his life. They moved around the damaged ship like they owned it, checking systems and securing equipment with the efficiency of people who had done this many times before. Commander Sullivan, Vexi said carefully, I must ask you something. Why did you help us? Your people are supposed to be quarantined. Could have ignored our distress call. Jake paused in his work and looked at the Zephyrian captain. Because you needed help. That is what we do. But you risked breaking your quarantine. There will be consequences. Amy Brooks laughed. Let them come. We did the right thing. During the next few hours, as the humans transferred supplies and completed repairs on the gentle current, Xi found himself in conversations that changed everything he thought he knew about Deathworlders. Lisa, Grant was explaining her medical equipment. To Zixra, when the Zisra went to Zifri and asked about the scars on her hands. Training accident when I was young, Lisa said casually. I was learning to climb rocks on a mountain, fell about 50 feet and broke both arms. Zixra stared at her. You climbed mountains for fun? Still do? There is a mountain range near my home where the winds can reach 200 miles per hour. Great place to test yourself. Paul Martinez was even more shocking. While showing Kivtar how he had repaired the engine, he mentioned that he had learned engineering by fixing vehicles during something called tornado season. Tornado season, Kivtar asked. Yeah, big spinning storms that destroy everything in their path. They happen every year where I grew up. My job was to fix the machines after the storms pass through. Your planet has regular storms that destroy cities? Paul nodded, like this was perfectly normal. Tornadoes, hurricanes, earthquakes, floods, droughts, blizzards. You name it, Earth probably has it. Makes life interesting. The most disturbing conversation happened when Amy Brooks was explaining her weapons to one of the younger Zephyrians. The alien asked why she carried so many different types of guns. Different situations need different tools, Amy explained. This one is for close combat in tight spaces. This one is for long-range work. This one is for armored targets.
Ow.
Do you know which one to use? Amy thought about it.
Training, mostly.
I've been shooting since I was 6 years old. 6 years old. The young Zephyrian's voice went high with shock. You were taught to kill as a child. Not to kill, Amy corrected. To protect, to survive. On Earth, you learn to defend yourself early, or you do not live long enough to learn later. Jake was the most frightening of all when he talked about his home. He mentioned surviving something called boot camp, where young humans were trained to fight by being subjected to conditions that would kill most galactic species. They made us crawl through mud under live gunfire, he said matter-of-factly. March for days without sleep. Fight with knives and bare hands. The idea was to prepare us for real combat. That sounds like torture, Vexi said. That was just the first week, Jake replied with what might have been a smile. As the repairs were completed and the prisoners transferred, Vexi realized that everything the Galactic Council thought they knew about humans was wrong. These were not mindless killers or savage beasts. They were intelligent, capable beings who had been shaped by a world so dangerous that surviving it required skills no other species possessed. Commander Sullivan, he said as the humans prepared to leave. When we reach the nearest station, I will have to report this contact to the Council. Jake nodded. I expected that. They will want to know everything about your people, about your capabilities. That is their choice. You're not worried about the consequences? Jake looked at him with those small predator eyes. Captain, we just saved your life and defeated 68 armed raiders without losing a single person. If the Council has a problem with that, they can come talk to us directly. As the Iron Wolf pulled away from the gentle current and disappeared into faster-than-light travel, Vexi stood on his bridge looking out at the stars. His ship was repaired, his crew was alive, and they had a story that would change the galaxy forever. The Deathworlders were not monsters, they were something. Far more dangerous than that, they were heroes. The Galactic Council chamber on Nexus Prime had not seen this much excitement in over 200 years. Representatives from 47 different species filled the Great Hall.
their voices creating a buzz of conversation that echoed off the crystal walls. At the center of it all sat Captain Vexai. Telling his story for the third time that day, Council Speaker Yelthera, a tall being with flowing tentacles instead of arms, called for order. Her species, the Veltar, had led the council for centuries. Through wisdom and careful diplomacy, they had never faced anything like this before. Captain Vexai, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. You are certain these beings called themselves humans? They came from the quarantined world we designated as Terra 3? Yes, Council Speaker Vexai replied. They made no attempt to hide their origin. They said they were from Earth. The death world your predecessors marked as too dangerous for contact. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The quarantine of Earth had been established 50 years ago. After long-range surveys showed a planet so hostile that no civilized species could survive there. The decision had been unanimous. The world was to be avoided at all costs. And these? Humans defeated 68 Korthok raiders with only 4 individuals. Asked Counselor Zekron, whose insectoid features clicked nervously. Not just defeated, Vexai said firmly. They hunted them. The Korthok were professional warriors with military weapons and armor. The humans treated them like children playing with toys. A new voice spoke from the back of the chamber. That is impossible. No species could achieve such combat effectiveness with so few numbers. All eyes turned to see Admiral Vekvar of the Korthok military enter the chamber. He was massive even by Korthok standards, his gray skin covered in battle scars. He had come to hear this story for himself. Admiral Council Speaker Yelthera said carefully, You were not invited to this session. I invited myself, Dekvar growled. When someone claims that for unknown beings destroyed an entire raid fleet, I want to hear the details. Vexai looked at the Korthak Admiral with a mixture of fear. In pity, your raiders are alive, Admiral. The humans captured 12 of them. You can ask them yourself what happened. I already did, Dekvar said grimly. My warriors tell stories that make no sense. They say these humans moved like ghosts and fought like demons. They say the Deathworlders turned the ship itself into a weapon, because that is exactly what they did, Vexai replied. The chamber fell silent. Counselor Zekron's clicking grew more rapid. Other representatives shifted nervously in their seats. The idea of beings who could fight like that was terrifying to species that had known peace for generations. Council Speaker Yelthera was about to respond when alarms began sounding throughout the chamber. Emergency lights flashed and automated. Voices announced an urgent message. Council Speaker came a voice over the communication system. We have received a priority distress call from Kepler Station. They are under attack by a massive Korthok invasion fleet. They are requesting immediate military assistance. The chamber erupted in panic. Kepler Station was one of the major trade hubs in Council space, home to over 2 million beings from dozens of species. If it fell to the Korthok, it would be a disaster. How many ships? Yelthera demanded. It's over 300 warships, Council Speaker. This is not a raid. This is a full military invasion. Admiral Vekvar smiled grimly. My people grow tired of your peace, Council. We take what we want now. This is an act of war against the entire Galactic Council, Counselor Zekron said, his voice shaking with anger. Your council has no military, Vekvar replied. Ev. Kept peace for so long that you forgot how to fight. Kepler Station will fall in 3 days. Then we will move on to the next system. The representatives looked at each other with growing desperation. The Korthok were right. Council had no real military force. They had relied on diplomacy and trade agreements for so long that they had no way to fight a determined enemy. Must evacuate Kepler Station, someone suggested. And then what? Dekvar asked. Where will you run when we take the next system? And the next? That was when Captain Vexai stood up. His voice cut through the panic like a blade. There is one option you have not considered. All eyes turned to him. The humans, he said simply. Ask the Deathworlders for help. The chamber fell silent again. The idea was so shocking that no one spoke for several long moments. That is impossible, Counselor Zekron finally said. The quarantine laws forbid contact with that world. Quarantine laws were written by people who did not know what humans
Really are, Vexhai replied. I have seen them fight. 4 humans destroyed a Korthok raid fleet. Imagine what 100 humans could do, or 1,000. You want us to invite Deathworlders into council space? Another representative asked. They could be more dangerous than the Korthok. The Korthok are invading your worlds right now, Vexhai pointed out. The humans saved my life and asked for nothing in return. Admiral Dekvar laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Even if these humans are real, they are just one ship. What can one ship do against 300? Before? Anyone could answer. Another alarm sounded. A new voice came over the communication system, calm and professional. Galactic Council, this is Commander Ellen Price of the Earth Defense Force ship Thunderhawk. We received reports of your situation and are offering assistance. The chamber erupted in shocked whispers. Another human ship had appeared in council space without anyone detecting it. This is Council Speaker Yelthera, came the shaky reply. How did you get here so quickly? We were already in the area when Captain Vexhai's report reached our people. We came to see if we could help. There are over 300 enemy ships heading for Kepler Station, Yelthara said. This is not something a single vessel can handle. There was a pause. Then Commander Price spoke again, and her voice carried the same calm confidence that Jake Sullivan had shown. Council Speaker, we are not a single vessel. You're the advanced scout for the 3rd Fleet. We have 47 ships in this task force. With more on the way, 47 ships against 300? Bekvar scoffed. Your Deathworlders will die quickly. Admiral Ellen Price said. And even through the communication system, her voice carried a chill that made everyone in the chamber shiver. We are humans. We do not die quickly. The communication ended, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. Outside, through the great windows of the council hall, they could see new ships appearing in the system. Human ships, dark and angular, moving with predatory grace toward the battle that would decide the fate of the galaxy. Jake Sullivan's rescue mission had become something much larger. The humans were no longer quarantined observers.
They were
About to become the galaxy's protectors, whether anyone wanted them to be or not.